people would always say to me, you can't do that because you're disabled.
I bullied a lot at school because of my disability. I found bad behaviour, so I found fighting and violence, and ended up in a really bad place where I was partying.
As time went on, I realised I tried all those things and I could do them.
Oh my God, come on, is this how you see?
I lived a life for other people's perception as opposed to my own sense of fulfilment, and that put me into a really bad place. So I regained consciousness sitting upright at a bus stop covered in blood, and it wasn't my blood. I had no cuts or anything, so I'd obviously had a fight with somebody.
So then every time someone said to me, you can't do it, I'd do it. So my life experience was, people will tell you can't do something, but if you try, you can.
When I went to surf Nazaré, the world media sort of said that they're going to kill the blind guy. But my whole life, the narrative that I've been told is you can't. I've sort of been given this excuse where I've always done the things that people say I can't do, so I don't believe the world when it tells me I can't do something.
Welcome back to another episode of the Limitless. Today we have with us Matt Formston, and he has a very, very inspiring story. I looked at his profile online and I really thought that this is going to be a perfect guest. He is a world champion athlete. He's a world record holder, and you will learn a lot more what's going on behind the scene because he's been facing a lot of adversity with a can mindset to reach this, and you will learn more. So hang on with us today. Matt, a warm welcome to you. How are you today?
I'm awesome. Thanks, Nick. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm dialing in from the beauty of cold Sweden today. Where in the world are you?
I'm in the beauty of cold. Well, I live just north of Sydney. The weather's been horrible the last couple of days.
Okay, yeah. That can happen. And I want to start right there, Matt. Tell us about yourself and what the work you're doing these days before we go into the stories and everything that built you.
Okay. Look, I'm currently I'm a professional surfer. I'm competing in freediving, so holding my breath and swimming down as deep as I can in the ocean. I'm a board member, so I work on executive on boards, running companies. I work as an executive at one of the largest telecommunications companies in Australia, and I've written a couple of books. And I'm a happily married, got 3 children, and I'm a very proud dad. I could keep listing things off, but I've got a Netflix film here in Australia. That's probably enough.
Yeah, wow, that sounds like a very successful life, Matt. And congrats to all of those achievements. And then, if you're looking behind the scene, also you have been facing some adversity. And can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the biggest adversity that people will jump straight to is the fact that I'm blind. So I've got no central vision. I'm completely blind in the centre of my vision, and I've got about 1% left. So there's 1% clarity, so I can sort of see a few shapes and lines on my left eye, and a little bit more on my right. So about 2 to 3% of peripheral vision on my right. It's not much. The technical term we use here in Australia is sweet fuck all. Apologies if I'm not allowed to swear on the pod, but that's how I sort of describe my vision. But that's one challenge. But actually, my biggest challenge, which I think more people will relate to, is I got bullied a lot at school because of my disability, and I found bad behaviour. So I found fighting and violence, and ended up in a really bad place where I was partying, and I lived a life for other people's perception as opposed to my own sense of fulfilment, and that put me into a really bad place. So that was actually my biggest challenge in life, was getting myself out of that. The blindness has also been hard, but that behavioural thing where I got into a place where I wasn't taking accountability for my life and my actions, that was probably the biggest hurdle that I've overcome.
Yeah, so interesting what I heard from you there, Matt, and thanks for your vulnerability here, was that while blindness was challenging, the bullying was even harder for you. Is that what I captured there?
Yeah, look, the bullying is hard, but I think it was the fact that because of the way I responded to the bullying, I got myself into behaviours that got me into a mindset that was and getting out of that mindset, getting out of the mindset that the world's against me. I've got excuses, all those things where it's everybody else's fault except yourself. Getting out of that mindset into a mindset where I'm responsible for all the outcomes in my life, and taking that on, that was the biggest adversity.
Wow, there's a lot to take in there, Matt, because I mean, the amount of things that you have achieved in your life, I think, of all the guests I've had, hundreds of guests on this show, I've had world record holders and so on, but to have been facing the adversity that you have faced, Matt, and to do the things that you've done, and not only then the paracycling, the surfing, the big waves in Nazaré, and the other stuff. I mean, it is almost too big to comprehend for people. What would you say to them? There might be people who just feel overwhelmed. Oh my God, how can he do that even? Is he superhuman? What would you say to that?
Look, people, I'm a keynote speaker. I speak all over the world, and a lot of people afterwards say, I'm just tired hearing you and I feel lazy after hearing you. But I've taken most of these things on one at a time. I mean, I've also run a corporate career in parallel with my sporting career, which a lot of it comes with, time management, focus, priority, all the things I'm sure that you've done. But what I'll say to them is, I think what's got me to a lot of these places is having a goal. But I think a lot of when I talk to people that sort of have a goal but don't really have a clear goal, then they don't know where they're going to, when they're going to get there, and then a map of how that's going to happen. And I think without that clear goal and that clear destination, and then a map to get there, it's pretty easy not to get places, right? You get lost. It's like any type of orienteering. If you don't have a clear map and a destination, you're going to get lost in the woods. And I think life's very similar to that. And I've always had very clear goals. And then I've been really good at building strategy, building teams, finding the right people to work with, and then working really hard, executing. And that's how I'm able to tick those goals off.
Yeah. And I believe that you're spot on here, Matt, and we're fully aligned. I'm a coach myself, and that's how I managed to excel in my life and go through adversities, to have clear goals, and also having the accountability, then having coaches and therapists or even psychologists and so on at the right time when I've been facing stuff. Who has been your resources to help you to set the goals or the accountability, or is this something that you've done by yourself?
When I was younger, it was mainly me. It was all, I was, because of my blindness, I wanted to be fiercely independent because I didn't want the world to see me as disabled. So I wouldn't accept anybody's help. But since the reason I sort of changed my whole self, I wanted to get married and I was having lots of failed relationships. And so the thing that actually moved the needle for me was I wrote a list of things that I wanted to have in a wife. And I realized that I wasn't there was about 12 things on this list, and I wasn't half the things on that list. So therefore, it wasn't reasonable for me to want to meet somebody that had all those things if I didn't have those things. So then I built a person that had those things to be, worthy of finding this person in my life. So that was about 2008. By 2010, I'd sort of done a lot of that work. And then from 2010 until today, I've basically won a world title or broken a world record in some sort of sport every year, or won a business award every year because of building those frameworks and taking accountability. But until that point, I was literally just floating through life. I mean, I had a good job. I was a sales director. I was running multi-million-dollar sales targets in enterprise strategic sales. On paper, it all looked great, but I wasn't actually that happy.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And I think many of the listeners will resonate with that. I know a lot of people who have fantastic jobs, great salary, and they aren't happy. And the challenge with that is if they tell someone around them, and everyone else will look at them and say, hey, you have a great job, you have a good salary, just shut up, you should be happy now. And you hear that once or twice, then many people might just turn inwards. Is that also what you experience, Matt, or?
It is. You mentioned earlier, we were talking about the can mindset, which is something that I talk a lot about. And I've got this new book, which I'm sure we'll talk about, called Why Not, and which is sort of the way that I approach the can mindset. So I grew up in a house where we weren't allowed to use the word can't, which won't be, I don't think that's foreign. A lot of people will say, yeah, my dad said that too, or my mum said that too. You can't, there's no such thing as can't. But what my dad would actually do, instead of just saying you can't say can't, or there's no such thing as can't, he would say, why not? And then you have to start explaining your can't. And as you start explaining your can't, you then start finding the solution.
Yes. So it sounds like
my whole life, the world has sort of said, you can't. Like I played rugby union, I played ice hockey growing up as a blind person, an able-bodied sport. When I went to surf Nazaré, the world media sort of said that they're going to kill the blind guy. So my whole life, the narrative that I've been told is you can't. And so I've sort of been given this excuse where I've always done the things that people say I can't do, so I don't believe the world when it tells me I can't do something.
That's fantastic. So it sounds like that framing from a young age really helped you, Matt.
Absolutely. Look, without my parents, I definitely wouldn't be the person I am. The frameworks that they and the behavioural set they gave me really set me up for success in life.
And if someone is listening now, so that's great for you, Matt. You had that already from your young age. Is it something that someone can change today? And and then maybe that's a good time to dig into your book. Why not?
Yes. Yes, I think it is. But I think it's also more difficult. I'll acknowledge that, because I think in the world we talk a lot about like generational wealth and just generational advantage. But I don't think we give enough credit to generational advantage when it comes to behavioural stuff. Like if your family give you those behavioural traits throughout your life, then you do have a generational advantage over someone that doesn't have those behavioural traits. And I'm very conscious of that. And people talk to me a lot about having a disability and the challenges of that, of being blind. But I actually see, not being given those behavioural traits or those frameworks in your family, in your childhood, maybe setting you back and maybe creating more difficulty in your life than my disability does.
Mm. And I want to also ask you here, Matt, about vision, because I'm a big believer in vision, and we can hear from many people who see that vision. First, you have the goals, you have your strategy, and then it's a vision to see them. And can I ask you, because I think most of the listeners, including myself, it's hard for us to imagine what it is to be blind. Can you
Yes.
can you still envision things? Can you have that vision inside your mind anyway?
I actually have a very visual memory. So, but I think it's probably different to the way you see it. My vision is probably different to your vision. Like I wouldn't imagine. I'd imagine if you were looking at an eagle, you would probably see lots of details in its feathers and the tips. And whereas if I imagine an eagle, it's like a cartoon character that's just an outline. And it's all blocky blocks, and it's all very simple. So I do have a very visual memory, but and visual goal orientation. But it's like when I set a world record for cycling for 4 kilometer pursuit in Mexico in a place called Aguascalientes in 2014, and I lived and breathed becoming a world champion. I wasn't a world champion at the time. I worked with a lady called Louise Laffey, and she got me to say I am a world champion. I didn't feel right to me. Like, you don't say something you're not, because I wasn't. But this is not in public. But I would just say, and I lived in this space of being a world champion and feeling it. Because I think visualizing, we talk about visualizing a lot as like just seeing something in your head. But I think you need to feel it as well. Like, and if you do meditation, you'll go into a place where you talk about the sensory. You might walk on a beach in your visualization in meditation. You'll feel the warm air on your skin, and you'll maybe step into the water and feel the cool water on your legs, or you'll feel the resonance of sound, or you'll go through that, that sensory, you immerse yourself in a sensory experience. I think visualization should be like that. So when I've envisioned becoming a world champion, it was about feeling the going through the effort of winning the race, but it was then also about standing on the podium, feeling the weight of the gold medal around my neck, listening to my national anthem being played, and living in that space of being that person that's already done the thing, and then it will turn up in your life.
Yeah, you give me goosebumps as you're sharing this, Matt. I think you're a true inspiration, and I think it's exactly what the world needs now, including many of the listeners here who might be going through some challenges in their life. And I just want to go back also at this moment just to dig into, because what we explore here on the Limitless podcast are the turnarounds and the challenges, and acknowledging that we all go through the roller coaster of life. We have our ups and downs, and if not too painful, could I ask you, have you had any rock bottom moment in your life? Anything that has been what you would say that I couldn't go much deeper there, or I was almost throwing in the towel at that moment, for example? Has it been any of those setbacks in your life that you can recall?
I've had a couple. So I mentioned that I went off the rails. When I was about 16, I was playing representative rugby union and ice hockey. I got sick and I got a glandular fever, and because of that, the doctor said my spleen was enlarged. If I got hit with a stick under the ribs of ice hockey, or I got a tackle, my spleen could rupture and I could die. So I missed the whole season. Now, as a person at the time, I had 5% vision. I was legally blind. I could sort of see enough to hear the puck and see it a little bit at my feet. And in ice hockey and in footy, I could sort of see the ball a bit. I'd know if someone was running. I had ways of managing it, so I've made up but by missing a season, I went from being one of the best players on the field or on the rink to feeling like a liability. So I lost sport, and sport was where I had linked my whole identity to. And I think if you talk to me about that bottom moment, there's probably some identity attached to it. At the same time, one of my best friends took his own life within a 6-month period. And so I'd lost my sport, which was where I was valued on my contribution, not my perception. At school, I got bullied. I was, always told about what I can and what I can't do and treated differently. Whereas in sport, I was just treated as one of the players. And then my best friend took his life, and that was really hard. That took me to a place where that was almost rock bottom. And but I remember sitting in a tree, and this is in my book, and just thinking about, like, if there is a God, how can he allow this so much pain to happen to these people? And I went to a Catholic school, and I was just sort of wrestling as a 17-year-old boy, sitting in this tree by myself, just wrestling with how the world can be so cruel, that, to the things that had happened to me and to my friend. And then a few years later, I'd gone, finished school. I learned that if someone bullied me, if I fought them, if I punched them, they'd stop bullying me. They'd never come back and say, how many fingers am I holding up? They'd stop deleting my work on my computer. They'd stop doing the little niggling things because I hurt them. So I learned to get good at hurting people. And I took that into adulthood. And then I ended up at, this is sort of my rock bottom moment. And sorry for the setup, but I think there's a bit of context that gets to this point. But I woke up at a bus stop on Christmas Eve. And when I say woke up, I'd drunken so much alcohol that I'd lost consciousness. So I regained consciousness sitting upright at a bus stop covered in blood, and it wasn't my blood. I had no cuts or anything, so I'd obviously had a fight with somebody. And then I went home Christmas Eve. I still to this day don't know who that person was. Don't know who I hurt or what happened. And then I had to wake up the next day and have Christmas with my family. And I remember just sitting there thinking about, this person, is the police going to turn up at the door? Had I hurt someone? What if the opposite happened? I could have got hurt. I was completely out of control. I was not in control of my life at all at that point. And that was the part where I started sort of grappling with, how do I get back to a point where I could be. I was a very proud boy playing representative rugby and ice hockey as a blind kid. That's a lot of pride attached to that. Not a lot of pride attached to the guy that's sitting at a bus stop covered in someone else's blood.
Yeah, and Matt, as a teenager or a young adult, with those events going against us, it's very easy for people to start playing the poor me card or making excuses. The world is against me. And I can remember myself, even I had a motorcycle accident in around age of 22. And when that happened, I remember even some of the people around me saying, oh, this is a good opportunity. You don't have to work now. You can just go to the insurance and sue the bastard, and that kind of mindset. And I see that over and over again, that it's easy then, rather than taking responsibility, to just blame the world and others. And then you get stalled for the rest of your life. Did you have any of those moments where you almost turned it around? And then if so, how did you get out of that?
So as a person with a disability, it's not just about you making excuses for yourself. It's actually harder to perform because the world is making excuses for you. So, at work, with my systems, I use voiceover because I can't see the screen, and that will clash with our corporate systems. So, always someone saying, "Oh, it's okay. You don't need to do that because the system doesn't work for you," or you didn't hit your KPIs or your sales target because you're blind, and so it's harder for you. So the world's making excuses for you all the time, and so you actually need to be more accountable. To say, actually, no, I don't want you to lower the bar for me. I want you to actually hold me to the same standard as everybody else. Or actually, I prefer to be held to a higher standard because I want to be a high performer. And I think that's something for leadership as well. Like, if you've got people with disabilities in your organisation, yes, they might need some requirements, and this goes back to someone just having a workplace injury. If they're sick for a few months, create the accessibility that they need. So whatever it's accessibility technology, or if it's a standing desk or whatever it is, so give them the bridge that needs to happen so that they can perform the way that other people in the team perform. But then once you've created that bridge, then you need to just hold them to the same standards as everybody else. Because otherwise you're setting them up to fail by reducing their KPIs, reducing their numbers of what you expect from them. You're actually setting them up to fail.
Mm-hmm. And if we think about this then in a family environment, for example, I know that many of the listeners are perhaps 40, 50, 60 years of age. They have teenage kids, and parenting has perhaps never been harder? I know many of them are saying, I'm trying to discipline my kid, but then they just run away and they're on the digital devices and phones and so on. So where would you say, Matt, if anything, should someone draw the line here? You know, it's one thing to set them up and then hold them accountable. Do you have any experience of what should we do to inspire, should we say, teenagers or someone so that they can strive?
Look, Nick, this is actually, so we mentioned my book a few times. This is the perfect place to go into it. So my book's called Why Not? The frameworks in the book, I call them my 8 hard standards. And I call them hard standards because, and then towards my last standard is trust. And I believe that trust is the most underutilized skill, and it is a skill. It's not just something that happens by luck. That anyone can use in business. It's a leadership tool, it's a sales tool, it's a revenue tool. Like if you've got higher trust with your customers, you can charge higher margins. You're going to have better retention with your clients. It just makes everything better, right? Your people will trust you. They'll work harder for you if they trust your strategy. So trust is a thing that we don't use well enough, and we're not consciously building. But to get to trust, I built an equation, and it's for trust, which is standards times consistency times time. And the times, the multiplication is purposefully there. So if any of those 3 variables, so it's standards times consistency times time, if any 3 of those variables are 0, it's all 0. But to get to the consistency and the time, you need to understand what the standard is. And so in families, as parenting, or even in business, most of us have, our 3 values on the wall that we say are the things that our business is guided by. But how many times do you see those values, or I would call them standards, and people don't actually know where the level is? Like if people aren't held accountable to those, then are they really values? Are they really things that are important, or are they just wishes that you hope will turn up someday? And I think that's that's what's happening a lot with parenting these days. I think standards have dropped across the community. If just the way people dress these days, it's we turn up to meetings later. We've all let our standards slip in some way, and then the standards I have, they're not just about turning up. They've actually their strategy. They're about leadership with empathy, all these different things. But essentially, a standard is something that has you either achieve it or you don't. And if you don't achieve it, then there's a consequence. And I think with parenting, we need to get better at letting kids know where the standard is. And then if they don't achieve that standard, then there needs to be a consequence. And that actually is good for the kids too. And when you set higher standards in a business, it's counterintuitive, because people think that's going to be stressful for your staff, but it actually creates better psychological safety, because then people know where the level is.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you mentioned psychological safety here, Matt, because I do work in that as well, and it's not about having friendly conversation. It's about having, and what should I say, not avoiding the difficult conversations, but empowering people to so that they have a chance to perform and increasing perform. That's my take on it, Matt. What would you say?
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's also about being consistent. If people see that someone else is being treated differently, they won't feel safe, because they don't feel that they're being, But if you show that you're treating everybody the same, and if you've got the same standards, and you're holding everyone to the same levels, and then they know what they need to get to. The one other thing that I would say that I see that works really well is I think called a standards meeting. So you actually agree on what are the standards, because if people, if you get off a call and you say, "Oh, Tim keeps on turning up late to meetings." Well, what does late mean? And what have we agreed as a team that late is? Is it 2 minutes late or 3 minutes late? Whereas when you agree as a team, actually, we're going to hold being on time as an important thing. And if you don't, then there's a consequence. I know in some teams that I've been in, if you're 2 minutes late, then, once a week we'll let it slide. If you're 5 minutes late, there's a $50 fine that goes to charity. So there's ways that you can create standards, and everybody knows what they are. And that way it's safer for everybody, because then you can actually say, "Hey, Tim, we all agreed as a team that we were going to all turn up on time, or within 2 minutes of the call starting. You're not doing that. Can you let us know why?" And it just makes everybody feel safer. Even though it feels like it shouldn't feel more safe because you're calling people out, it actually is a safer environment because everyone knows where the levels are.
But to dig into all these topics, and many of the listeners might be going through a difficult time, but what I learned is that we do everything we can to protect that. We don't want the world to know that we are going through a tough time. I can do it by myself. And perhaps men are worse than women in general in this, in keeping the secrets. Women, what I found, are a little bit more vulnerable. They have a few friends they can trust. So if someone is going through a very challenging time now, they're keeping it secret, what recommendations would you have to them, Matt?
It's such a hard topic, and I think it's generational. Like my dad was a very hard man, and you know, it's not tough to, you know, where I was brought up, it's not tough to tell everyone your problems, and it's a challenging thing, and it depends on what house you were brought up in as well. But I would say that you need to find that person you can talk to, and if there's no friend that you feel safe to talk to, then you mentioned before counselling. Like I've at one point in my life went on a went and did a few counselling sessions. It was around a really tough breakup that I had, and I couldn't really understand if I was doing the right thing or not, and I just needed to get someone else's perspective on it, and that's the thing that I needed help with, and by getting that perspective and just getting someone to listen and say, no, actually, what you're doing is reasonable, and you're not being an unreasonable person. That really helped me, and I think I'm very lucky that I've got some close friends that I can share things with. But I think sharing is, once going back to the why not framework that I've got. Like, if you can't talk about the problem, then you won't find the solution. The act of talking and going through articulating a problem is actually the fastest way to finding the solution.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Matt. And I also know that you had some big challenges later on as a man, perhaps a decade after you were sitting on that bus, when you again were going through a challenging time you had to face yourself. Could you share a little bit of what was happening there, and how did you get out of that?
Yeah, I mean, that was, I think you're referring to that sort of time when I was, I'd sort of explained this earlier, but I was sort of on paper doing well. I was account director for a big company, had a property in Sydney. I just bought my second property. So on paper, everything looked great. But I just wasn't happy, and I was just floating through life in reality. And I wasn't the life that I talk about now, the standards, to holding myself to a higher standard than other people. I wasn't doing that. And so I said the 12 things that I wanted in a wife. And the way I got to that point was I was staying at my little sister had an apartment, house. So I was staying there after I just had another failed relationship, about to move into this new property, but it wasn't ready yet. And I met this guy outside as I was going out to hang my washing out. He was out there, and he was unemployed, and he was about 60. I was about 30 at the time, and he was living with his mother, who was in her 80s. And I just thought, and this is, sorry for anyone that's listening, but this is what my brain thought at the time when I was 30. I just thought, what a loser. And I really wanted to have children. I really wanted to get married. I wanted those things. That was important to me, and that's not important to everybody, but that was something that I wanted. And I thought, I don't want to be that person. And he kept saying, I used to have this job, and it was all about the things he used to do, and he used to be, this, and it's the world's fault that he doesn't have a job anymore. And his mum would make excuses, he was amazing at this and that, and he had all these friends, and I thought about that, and I walked inside, and I thought, oh my God, that could be me. I don't want that to be me. So then what do I need to do for that not to happen? And therefore, how do I meet this wife? Then I wrote down the things, and then I started doing the standards. So the first thing I did was actually put a chin-up bar in my doorway in my bedroom, because I was just letting myself down. I'd create a standard, and the next day I'd change it. I'd move the goalposts, or I'd say, I'm going to do this next month. And then if I didn't get there, I didn't care. I'd just make excuses for myself. So I started basically saying, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to commit to it, and I'm going to finish it. So I put a chin-up bar in my doorway, and I just said, I'm going to do 10 chin-ups every time I walk in or out of the bedroom, regardless of what happens. So I remember even one morning I was on my way to work. I'd left my keys in my bedroom. I went back in. I had my suit on ready to go to work. This is back in the days where I wore a suit every day. And I didn't take my jacket off, but I did tension, and I ripped my suit. But I was so focused on, because I wanted to get to work on time. But I just stopped making excuses for anything, and I said, these are the things that are important. Then I started getting to work at a certain amount of time. So I think it was 20 minutes before my first meeting, to make sure I could have a coffee and I was relaxed. I wasn't flustered and rushed. And it just started building in more and more things, more redundancy and more capacity into my life. And the funny thing is, Nick, when I think about that life that I had back then, like now I sit on multiple boards. I've got 3 children, a wife. I'm a professional athlete. I travel all over the world. I'm a keynote speaker. I've got lots of different things pulling me in different directions. Right? There's no way that person back then could do what I do now because I just didn't have the capacity. I built capacity over time. But it's funny that what I do now with all those different, I call them hats, all the different hats that I wear, it's easier than that life that I was living earlier because I wasn't organised and I wasn't taking things seriously. So everything felt hard.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So it sounds like that chin up bar was really the defining moment, and you've gone from chin up bars to surfing some of the biggest waves in the world. That's a lot of trust you must have in the people around you and the universe. And can you elaborate on that? Because clearly there's a lot outside of your control there.
Yeah, that word trust comes up again. And yes, so I surfed at a place called Nazaré in Portugal. It's where all the world records are set. I actually set a Guinness World Record there, which was a 51-foot wave. So it's essentially a 5-story building of a wave. And yeah, a lot of trust, but the trust goes both ways. You know, people die. A man died there 3 weeks after I was there surfing smaller waves. So it's a very serious activity. But I knew my team. I built the capacity. You know, I don't just do these things recklessly. I built the capacity. I built the processes. I had the best team in the world. For anyone that's a surfer, I had Lucas Chanka as my tow driver, and Dylan Longbottom as my first safety. Like I had some very good people in my corner. But trust, I think we always look at as an external thing between potentially 2 people a lot of the time. But the way I see trust, I've sort of built trust into 5 pillars, and it starts with self-trust. And going back to my chin-up bar, and when I was moving the goalposts all the time and making excuses for myself, and I'd get to the end of a month and say, "Oh, I know I said I was going to do 130% of my sales target, but actually, it doesn't matter. I just did, I did 95 this month because 2 months ago I did 150. So therefore, whereas when I moved to my new mindset, I'll be like, no, I said 130, I didn't hit 130. So what did I get wrong? And I hold myself accountable. And that builds trust by, having a standard and being consistent. You build trust in yourself. And Nazaré is the same. I built all the capacity in myself. So I trusted myself to have the capacity to surf that wave. Like before I went there, I trained to hold my breath. So Nick, what do you think is a long time to hold your breath? Do you think for me before I went to Nazaré as a surfer?
Wow, I would guess it's 1 minute a long time.
Bit more.
Wow, 2.
Keep a little bit further.
Really, 3 minutes.
So the week before I went to Nazaré, I did a breath hold of 5 minutes and 48 seconds.
Wow. That's unbelievable. How long did it take you to train you to reach that?
It was, I'd been around the 2 to 3 minute mark as a professional surfer for a while, but I did intensive training for about 6 months to get up to the 6 minutes.
What kind of training do you do for that? Is it breath hold meditation, or how do you practice that?
Yeah, it's breath hold meditation. It was a lot of because as a big wave surfer, you don't get to relax. So that's a passive breath hold where I'm laying still in the water. But obviously, when you're dropping into a 50-foot wave, your heart is elevated, heart rate's elevated, and there's obviously high amounts of stress. So so we do training underwater with high heart rate. I do fighting underwater like jiu-jitsu with 2 other people underwater. So you're not managing the time, and my coach manages the time. I do swimming, so I'll do multiple laps. I'll come up and do 1 breath. And please don't do this if you're not trained, if you're not a professional athlete, or if you don't have the coach, do not do these exercises. But I'll do like a full lap of a 50-meter pool. I'll come up, have a breath, and then exhale all the air out of my lungs, and then swim again another 50 meters. And it's just staying relaxed, because if you panic at any time or try and swim faster, you'll run out of air and pass out. So it's just training your body, showing your body that it can do these things. So that when you get into an uncontrolled environment like giant waves, and I got absolutely drilled by a 50-foot wave once and got dragged underwater so far that there's thousands of people watching from the headland at Nazaré. I was in an orange wetsuit, and that no one could find where I'd gone. I got dragged that far underwater. So you need to have more capacity than what you think. So going back to your trust question, I had the trust in myself. My team had seen me surf big waves before, so they had the trust that I could do it. And to the point you said before about people doubting or making excuses. The world had always said I can't. So the world media at that point was saying they can't do it. But we knew that we could because we had the data that I'd done those things. They knew that they had the protocols and the safety to get me. And we sort of adapted things. So I can't see the wave, obviously, when I'm letting go of the rope. So my tow driver blows a whistle to let me know I'm in the right spot, and I pull the rope and let go. And then as I'm going down, I was turning too late. So they said, Matt, we'll blow the whistle a second time. So eventually we blew the whistle. He blew it the first time to let go of the rope, a second time to turn, and then a third time when the wave was about to finish and I kick out of the wave. And by doing that, they were able to sort of he would let me go off the tow rope. He tows me in with a jet ski, and then he'd watch from the corner and use the whistle to steer me through like a remote control. And then I'd kick out of the wave and they'd retrieve me and we'd go back out again.
Wow. It sounds like you've gone through more in your lifetime, Matt, that perhaps a whole nation would. It's unbelievable, your story. So thanks for all the inspiration today, Matt. And I just want to ask you then, so the question I ask all guests as well, what does a limitless life look like for you, Matt?
I gauge my life these days as a parent on how my children lives are. It's not how they perform. I don't want them to be millionaires or be a world champion athletes, or I want them to just be happy people that contribute to society. And I think if I can create 3 children that are happy people and they create happiness around them and they build capacity in the world, then my life has been successful, regardless of all my achievements and everything else that I've done. But my life's still going. Like Nick, I'll share, if you give me a moment, I'll share one more story, which I did recently. I'm now freediving, so I'm swimming down. I'm planning to set a world record in freediving this year. We never thought it was possible for me to swim through a shipwreck. But once again, using adapted technology, we use my cane. I use a cane on land to feel the ground. My coach held one end of my cane, I held the other. We swam 60 feet down in the ocean and swam through a World War II shipwreck, a Japanese shipwreck in Indonesia. And we filmed that for a new documentary we're making. But to me, that's limitless. The world would always say that it would be impossible. A blind person swimming on a single breath through a shipwreck 60 feet underwater. It just sounds like it's not possible until you start saying why you can't. You start mapping the can't out and you start asking the question, why not? And when you ask the question, why not, you start telling yourself why. And then you're able to start building you can start solving those problems. And when you solve the problems, you can then go forth and do anything you want to do in the world.
Fantastic. I love that inspiration. And I think that's a wonderful place to end today, Matt. And just any question that I forgot to ask you, any last message that you want to leave with the listeners before we're letting you go, Matt?
No, nothing for me. Is there anything you wanted me to wrap up with?
No, I think we are good, Matt. I just want to say that it's been a true inspiration. I think one of my favorite quotes that I share this year is, an easy life is hard and a hard life is easy. And for me, it's really been like that. I mean, it's hard to get out on that bike ride on a rainy day, but it's even harder to lie there on the sofa and feeling that you're letting yourself down. That's what I learned, Matt. Is that the kind of mindset that resonates with you as well?
It's funny, Nick. That's one of the standards. So I said there's 8 standards in my book. One of the standards is the hard way is the easy way.
There we go. I will pick up a copy of your book and the Why Not book, right? I will recommend it to all the listeners as well. So thank you so much, Matt, and thanks to the listeners as well.
Thanks, Nick, and thank you for listeners. And look forward to hopefully speaking to someone somewhere in the world.